This man grew into a billionaire with cocaine trading in a short time. His fortune was eventually estimated at €1.5 billion. Did his rapid rise to the top also cause his downfall? This is the story of Samir Bouyakhrichan, alias Scarface. Samir was born in 1980 in Nador, Morocco, and emigrated to the Netherlands as a baby. Coming from a family of 5 children, he grew up in Amsterdam West in the Slotervaart neighborhood. When he was young, he was often with his friends in Confectiecentrum and August Alibepalen. As an inquisitive student, he was enrolled by his parents at the Fons Vitae Lyceum in Amsterdam Zuid from 1896 to 1994. With a reputation for being arrogant, he mostly lived at night. Eventually, he dropped out of college and surrounded himself with young delinquents. He loves fighting and is a loyal customer of a nightclub Escape in Amsterdam. He is regularly involved in fights at the nightclub. He owes his nickname Scarface to a scar he has under his right eye from a fight at the same nightclub. A man had thrown a glass bottle at his face. During his youth, he befriended well-known figures within the Amsterdam underworld and built a network this way. At age 20, he entered the criminal world very quickly and built a good relationship with Colombian cocaine suppliers. He was one of the few allowed to use his own stamp on the cocaine bricks. Samir had 2 sides. One side, the charming, ideal son-in-law. Handsome guy, always surrounded by the most beautiful women and provided with the most expensive items, and very generous. The other side, tough as nails when necessary. He allegedly took over networks from close contacts while they were in prison, obviously with their consent. On April 14, 2003, Antillian Jemmy Nikento was murdered in Rotterdam. Jemmy was shot dead in a porch on the Dordt Salaan. The investigation revealed that the murder involved 1,100 kilos of cocaine. After the murder, Samir went to Colombia. He knew there was a batch with no owner and that he wanted to sell it for the Colombian cartel. Thus, he had become a major player all at once. Upon his return, he was arrested by the Dutch police. For lack of evidence, Samir was released and the case was closed. After that, things only went uphill for Samir. Largely in Dubai, he reportedly owns 25% of an oil company. Furthermore, he invested heavily in real estate, including in Spain. In 2008, he moved to southern Spain, Marbella, and held the position of real estate entrepreneur. After paying for a luxury villa thanks to his first pocket money, he deregistered from the Amsterdam City Council to stay under the radar. Very discreetly, he did not reveal any pictures of himself on social networks and never takes pictures of himself. At just 23 years old, his wealth was estimated at €500 million, most of which is invested in Dubai. Another part of the capital is invested in Spain in real estate, in the 2 companies known as Roro Trading Company and Albina Properties, both based in Marbella. Samir frequently resided in Marbella in the shadow of the Irish Costa cartel and his Amsterdam friends. Samir was reportedly an ally of the Kinahan clan from Ireland, led by Daniel and Christopher Christie Kinahan, aka the Dapper Don. Aside from Ireland, their group operates mainly from southern Spain, the Costa del Sol. Investigative agencies considered the Kinahan organization to be one of the largest European players in the global drug trade, which also has major interests in the Brazilian tourist industry, among others. The Kinahan clan was engaged in a bloody gang war with the rival group around the Hutch family. The cartel's top men have their heavily secured villas and mansions in the same area, south of Marbella. Samir and his Amsterdam friends rent apartments or stay in luxury hotels here. Samir rented several properties in the area so as not to stay in one place for long. Officially dealing in real estate, he had several companies with his name in Marbella. He did everything he could to maintain that image and tried to stay out of the limelight. This was quite successful. No photograph of him was ever published on the internet or anywhere else. But his name was mentioned more and more often. So, Scarface eventually becomes a major player in the international drug scene because of good contacts with cartels in South America and a corrupt customs officer in the Antwerp port, Tim D, who worked for him. He manages to bring in large batches of pure cocaine, and his fortune would eventually be around €1.5 billion. One of Scarface's biggest mistakes has to do with the attempted liquidation of John Gubbels. On July 14, 2010, Samir sent a commando of 7 assassins to kill John Gubbels in Breda. John is a Dutch trafficker suspected of stealing a quantity of 500 kilos of cocaine in Italy. This batch was allegedly owned by Scarface. In the evening, the gunmen, armed with AK-47s, accidentally kill 12-year-old Danny Gubbels, John Gubbels' son. The young man's mother was also hit by bullets. The 2 gunmen were Bahida and Munir. The case caused a stir in the Netherlands. The hitmen kicked on the door to get inside. They did not succeed. The story goes that this was because the door opened outward instead of inward. Since no one responded inside, they assumed no one was inside. To still leave a message, they decided to take the house under fire. But son Danny was at the computer and his mother was in the room. John had already gone to bed. Mother was slightly wounded and Danny was fatally hit. Principal of the revenge action in Breda was most likely Samir. Samir would not have been satisfied with the €2 million compensation John paid. The batch of cocaine represented a value of €17 million. Scarface therefore hired some people to apply some pressure. For Scarface himself, the Gubbels affair also had many consequences. Many other big guys blamed him for the death of Danny Gubbels. Surely, someone who brings in as much as he doesn't have an innocent boy shot for 500 kilos. Even if that wasn't the intention. From then on, a number of people didn't want to work with him anymore. Then it became October 2012, the moment when Najib Bouhbouh was liquidated in Antwerp. This liquidation has the most far-reaching consequences in Dutch criminal history. Scarface's group probably had nothing to do with the affair, although in the beginning there were rumours that Scarface might have been one of the financiers of the stolen batch of cocaine. But that already didn't make much sense. The 200 kilo batch issued had been financed by some small investors from Amsterdam. Crumbs for Scarface, who could easily pull off something like that on his own. But Scarface would still feel the aftermath of Bouhbouh's murder and the chain reaction that followed. The death of Najib Bouhbouh was a huge blow to Gwenyt Martha, who lost not only a close friend, but also his associate and confidant. It all would have remained under control if Gwenyt had been able to continue directing his own group. But that's where things went wrong. A few weeks after Najib's murder, Gwenyt was detained because he was suspected of preparing an attack on Bouhbouh, who was said to have given the commands for Najib's murder. During the months Gwenyt was detained, business was to continue. One of his errand boys was Najib Himich, nicknamed Ziggy, a young boy, then 26, with ambitions. Active in the kickboxing world, Ziggy regularly visited Gwenyt in prison for instruction. That went well, maybe a little too well. Ziggy attracted much more work to himself than intended. He took over Gwenyt's contacts, and he thought he could manage without Gwenyt. He got in touch, at Gwenyt's intercession, with Samir, who was up for pulling Ziggy closer to himself. In the summer of 2013, on the Spanish coast, where Samir and his group were domiciled, there was a meeting with Ziggy where things were settled. Samir encouraged Ziggy. Samir invested $2 million for him in a batch of cocaine. Ziggy was already able to compete a little with the big boys because of this. When Gwenyt returned after his detention, he noticed that the atmosphere had changed. Ziggy was no longer the little guy. He belonged to Scarface's group. Ziggy had built his own network. He had no intention of becoming Gwenyt's pawn again. He was being pulled further and further into Scarface's group. Ziggy found himself in a curious split. Even in the underworld, one cannot serve two parties. At certain points, it was impossible to be loyal to both Scarface and Gwenyt. Scarface noticed this. He noticed that Ziggy was not carrying out certain orders for him. Distrust arose. Ziggy became paranoid and no longer knew who he could and could not trust. It always remains a bit of speculation, but Gwenyt's heirs suspected Ziggy of having a hand in Gwenyt's liquidation in May 2014 in Amstelveen, because Gwenyt had seen through Ziggy. That could have been the end of the matter. The main antagonist had disappeared from the scene. Nothing stood in the way of good further cooperation between Scarface and Ziggy, you might say, but the trust was gone. Even among others in Scarface's group, whose side was Ziggy on? He had sacrificed Gwenyt, once a traitor, On the night of Wednesday 27th to Thursday 28th of August 2014, Samir finds himself in Marbella at the All One Cafe in Montehalcones, one of the rare catering establishments within a 5-kilometer radius. Not in the village itself, but in a small shopping centre a kilometre outside, there are only fancy establishments. Samir sat on a terrace around a table. Next to him sat figures from the Mokro Mafia, including Nurfel Fazir, Najib and rapper Jagger Jagger. When 2 gunmen arrive, Najib punches Samir in the face. Samir reportedly made another attempt to flee, but was unsuccessful. He was shot at close range in his head and back and died at the scene. The Guardia Civil was quickly on the scene. Initially, there was a misunderstanding, and it was thought that in Holland that there were 2 victims. Samir was riding in the car of another Amsterdam Moroccan. Presumably the Dutch police's poor Spanish and the Spanish police's poor English were to blame. Samir must have been completely at ease. He looked like he had just come from the beach. He was walking on flip-flops, wearing swim trunks and a t-shirt. The exact cause of his death is not known. There are rumours of a conflict with the Kinahan clan, with whom he was allies. Others explain that Samir wanted to take control of the entire Costa del Sol, and that there were certain individuals who did not want that. Dutch authorities speak of an act of revenge by the group of Gwenit Martha, who was murdered a few months earlier. This is the story of Samir Scarface Bouyakhrichan. Despite his wealth and network, he was still murdered. Could his murder have been orchestrated by Nurfel Fazir's network, who was still a member of the Gwenit Martha group? Did Najib play a role in this? Or are there other reasons after all, such as orders from the Kinahan family? For now, I want to thank you for watching. Please leave a like and comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon.